Right now, we want to take you back to the George R. Brown Convention Center.
Yes, Mr. Ted Cruz is speaking there right now. We're going to listen in, and then we'll take you back to Transtar. They're still talking there.
Our friends to the east, Beaumont is getting hit very, very hard by the storm right now. Louisiana is getting hit very, very hard by the storm right now. And so our prayers are with those who are in immediate harm's way as the search and rescue continues. You know, I just saw a photograph of the I-10 freeway headed out by Beaumont that was completely underwater and had waves. It looked like you were looking at the Gulf of Mexico. And so this remains a very dangerous storm. I'm here this morning back at the George R. Brown Convention Center, which has been set up as a shelter. It initially was set up to house 5,000 people. The capacity last night, there were about 11,000 people here. We're seeing an outpouring of love and care and support. Across the region, we have, that we know of, about 32,000 Texans who have sought shelter. Many more are staying with friends, are staying with families, are renting hotel rooms. But those who have sought shelters in the shelters that have been stood up, it's about 32,000. And there are about 230 shelters across the Houston region and across the state. And so we're seeing a really incredible outpouring of love and support and care. And that will be ongoing. It is terrific here seeing all the volunteers who come out and help, especially all the young people. It's really nice to see college students, to see high school kids coming out saying, how can I help my community? How can I make a difference for people in need? That has been, throughout this devastating storm, the most inspiring part of it all is the response of Texans coming together, Texans helping Texans, and the unity we're seeing. We will make it through this storm, and on the other side, we will rebuild. To those who lost their homes, to those who lost their businesses, that's an enormous trauma. It's very difficult to deal with, but we will rebuild. We will come together, and Texas will come back stronger than ever. Houston will come back stronger than ever, because that's the spirit of who we are.
Senator Cruz, where do you stand on a federal aid package that will be coming through Congress? Chris Christie this morning called them disgusting for using what he called reprehensible lies to back up your vote against Superstorm Sandy aid. How do you respond to that?
You know, I think it's really sad that there's some politicians that seem very desperate to get their name in the news and are tossing around all sorts of political insults. We have people whose lives are in danger. We have people who are fleeing floodwaters and fleeing for their lives. And I wish all of us were focused on providing the help and relief to people facing a natural disaster, facing a crisis. I'm a Houstonian. I have been here this entire week at home, and my focus has been trying to help bring together and coordinate federal and state and local assets to save and preserve lives. You know, going back this past weekend on Saturday, the Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner and the county judge here at Emmett both told me that we lack sufficient assets for high water rescues, that the calls to 911, the volume was so great that there were not enough boats, there were not enough helicopters and high water trucks to meet the need. And so I immediately hung up the phone and began calling federal officials, state officials, spoke with the governor, spoke with the president, the vice president, numerous cabinet members. And within hours, we saw enormous resources being marshaled and deployed here on the ground. The governor deployed over 500 Texas DPS troopers, sent them to Houston to help with search and recovery. The governor called up over 3,000 National Guardsmen to send to Houston. It's now over 13,000 National Guardsmen who's been called up to help with disaster relief. The governor sent boats and helicopters. At the federal level, the Coast Guard deployed more helicopters for high water rescue to help people in need. We also saw all across the spectrum, we saw actually Border Patrol down in the Rio Grande Valley sent up manpower, sent up helicopters, sent up boats, sent up jet skis, sent their teams trained in high water rescue. And within a matter of hours, we saw an enormous increase in the resources on the ground. That was from a cooperation that we've seen from the federal government, the state government, and the county and local government. that is really remarkable, and it's a cooperation. It's cross-party lines. None of those divisions matter in a time of crisis. What matters is we need to come together and save the people whose lives are at risk. And I'll tell you the most inspiring thing is all of the hundreds and thousands of Texans who just stepped up to save their neighbors. When the local officials put out a call, if you've got a flat-bottom boat, if you can help someone in need, please do so. We saw an incredible outpouring from the community. A couple of days ago, I was at the Harris County Emergency Command Center. There's an entire wall covered with Post-its of just Houstonians who called in and said, you know, I've got a boat, I can help. And their name and cell phone number was there. And so as calls came in crisis, they could pick up the phone and call someone on their cell and say, hey, your neighbor 4 blocks over, they're in trouble. Can you go get them? And it was an incredible armada of Texans helping Texans. We've seen that in the crisis, and, you know, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now with the disaster relief. The number of Texans all across the state who are going to the Red Cross website, going to the Salvation Army website, who are contributing, who are donating, who are volunteering. We're coming together to meet a crisis, and we need to continue to do that. And, you know, you asked about the federal response. There's stages to a crisis, to a disaster like this. The first stage is the immediate crisis and dealing with the preservation of lives and coordinating all of the assets to get people out of harm's way. We're nearing the end of that process. We're not yet done. There's still, Beaumont is facing a very dangerous situation. But hopefully in a few days this storm will be done, and that first crisis situation will have passed. After that
federal aid money, will you vote yes for it? Yes, you will vote yes for it. And why did you vote no against Sandy then? How can you justify that?
The next stage is rebuilding. The next stage is going to be Texans going back to their homes and seeing what's left. Some may return home, and thank God the floodwaters didn't enter their home and they're able to go back home and be there. Others will discover devastating losses. And the process of rebuilding, there's a process that is led by FEMA at the federal government that involves calculating the losses. People put in insurance claims. The first resource is insurance claims, and then FEMA has a process as a safety net for those who lack sufficient insurance. The process of rebuilding in Texas, it's going to take weeks and then months, and it will take ultimately years to rebuild the devastating damage that occurred. Absolutely, yes, Congress will step in and provide very significant resources for the people who have been damaged by this terrible storm. That effort will be led in the Senate by John Cornyn and myself. It will be led in the House by the Texas congressional delegation. We will lead the effort following federal law, following federal statute, which provides that when a natural disaster strikes, that citizens are entitled to have relief, and we have very specific federal formulas that are set up to calculate that. We also have the very explicit commitment of President Trump and the administration. I spent yesterday with the president in Corpus Christi and Austin, and the president was unequivocal in his commitment that the administration would be there for Texas and be there enthusiastically. Now, you are right. There has been some political sniping over Sandy. Sandy was another devastating crisis, and every Texas Republican in Congress supported giving aid to the people of Sandy, to the victims of Sandy. All of us spoke out enthusiastically that, of course, there should be aid pursuant to the federal statutes to those in harm's way. Most of the Texas congressional delegation voted against the final bill because the final bill got loaded up. It was a $50 billion bill, 70% of which was not emergency aid. Only 30% of that bill was emergency aid. For example, that bill included money for fisheries in Alaska. Now, the last I checked, Hurricane Sandy didn't go anywhere near Alaska, and so the Texas congressional delegation an emergency relief bill. In Texas, we're going to see bipartisan support in Congress, across Congress, for providing the aid that Texans need, and it will be the Texas congressional leadership leading the effort to make sure that we have the resources and tools to rebuild.
But then can you guarantee that you will hold the same standards up for this bill and you will vote against aid in this case if there's pork in it?
We are going to craft a bill that is dedicated to repairing the damage from Harvey, that is dedicated to the victims of Harvey. That is going to be the focus of crafting this bill, and that is what we should do. And the damage from this storm is going to be massive. The process of quantifying it will take some time. The process of quantifying it, we've got to wait till the floodwaters recede to assess what's been damaged, but on any estimate, this is going to be a massive cost in terms of the damage, and there are federal formulas that lay out what that compensation should be, and I am confident we will see Republicans and Democrats coming together. We are going to draft a bill that is focused very directly on disaster relief and the victims of Harvey. That's the job that we should do, and that's the job I believe we're going to do. Yeah.
But will there be, or do you think there will be an outpouring of support from your fellow senators, especially New York, New Jersey, where they were directly impacted by this?
I am confident that we will see strong bipartisan support throughout Congress. I can tell you in the past week, I have had a number of my colleagues in the Senate call me, both Democrats and Republicans, call and reach out and just say, we're here for the people of Texas. We're standing with you. We're praying for you. We're lifting you up. And I know Texans have felt that across the country. The prayers that we've received, the generosity that we've received. We've had search and rescue teams coming from all over the country coming here to help. We've had volunteers coming from all over the country coming here to help. And it's when our country's in crisis, we come together and stand together, and it makes us stronger. And Texas, we will come through this and come through this process even stronger.